Hey, EO Alive, thanks for joining us today for this CHD COVID update. And like always, I'm joined today with Carrie Bergiotti. Thanks, Carrie, for jumping in with us and helping us on this seems like forever journey. Can you believe it? Yeah, it's fall. The leaves are changing. It's beginning to turn a winter again. I mean, did we ever imagine that was going to go on this long?
No, I think that you and I were probably both not expecting to be continuing to be talking in November.
Yeah.
So I was just remarking on the change in lighting here because of the time change. Yes, it's definitely been a long haul for sure, and I think we'll probably be in it for a while longer.
Yeah, good or bad. So
Yeah.
and I mean, I'm on a number of boards and committees that organize things, and Main Street and uh, Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Board, and all of those things are delayed or messed up, and I mean, there have been just a number of events that we've had to cancel, and yeah, just what a crazy time that we're in. So
Yeah.
well, okay, well, Carrie, catch us up on what's new. Talk to us about what's current and what's new news for us, and what are some of the things that we need to be reminded of.
Yeah, so as you and I were talking earlier, sometimes it doesn't feel like it's new. I feel like we're talking about a lot of the same things over and over again, which I think I even need reminders about a lot of these things. So we'll keep talking about them probably for a while. But I think most of your viewers will probably have noticed that in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a pretty significant increase in the number of cases that are being reported. I know we've talked about before the fact that we didn't really we're not really surprised by this. We definitely expected that as the weather started to change, as people started going back to classrooms, both our elementary school and younger students and our university students, where they're putting really great mitigations and precautions in place, but the reality is that when anybody gathers with people outside of their household, there is risk involved in that. And there are just lots of things going on in the community where people are interacting with people outside of their household, and then they may go home, or they may be gathering in places where they're likely to be in close contact with people. So we're not surprised to see the increase in cases. We were kind of anticipating that would happen at some point as we moved into fall. But, I do think it does really hit home the fact that we do have COVID-19 in Union County, and that we do have pretty simple steps that people in our community can take to, slow the spread of the virus, mitigate the risk of getting the virus or giving the virus to others. And so we really just want to remind folks to stay home if they're sick. And I know that can be really hard for people. I know it can have really severe consequences to miss a day of work, or concern that you're not going to be able to pay your bills or get food on the table because you're staying home if you're sick. But, at the same time, we really do know that the virus is out there. And so we really do need to ask people to stay home if they're feeling ill, and also to stay home if they're coming into contact with somebody that had COVID-19. I think one of the things I was hoping we could talk about today was case investigation and contact tracing. And, I think we have talked a lot, especially early on, back way, way long ago in the spring, about contact tracing. And I remember when we first started responding to the pandemic, that there was this huge focus in the media and all of our conversations on contact tracing. And I don't feel like we've talked about it as much lately. But when we look at stopping the spread of COVID-19 or slowing the spread of COVID-19, one of the best tools we have is to identify people that are at risk and isolate them or quarantine them. Or if they have COVID-19, we would isolate them. If they're a contact to somebody that has COVID-19, we would quarantine them. And that is literally the best tool that we have to maintain the virus. You identify people that have it, you keep them away from other people. You identify people that are at risk of developing it, you keep them away from other people. And that is, again, one of the best tools. So when we talk about contact tracing, the process we use in public health when we identify a case is we do what we call a case investigation. And so we talk to somebody who's been tested positive for COVID-19. We identify all of the people that they have come into close contact with. Now, I do want our community to know that recently we've changed the definition of close contact to basically include a cumulative 15 minutes of being within 6 feet of somebody that has COVID-19. So, and before we would say 15 minutes total next to somebody for within 6 feet of somebody. Now we really feel like you can also be at risk if you interact with somebody multiple times during a day that has it, but not necessarily for a full 15 minutes. So, if you and I were working together or in a social setting or in any kind of setting where, we might spend a couple minutes in close contact, then go away from each other, spend another couple minutes, and then, that adds up to 15 or more minutes, then you might also be at risk. So we really are looking at, again, close contacts, and we identify those people, and then we call them and we ask them to quarantine for 14 days. And the 14 days is that we believe that the virus can appear within a 14-day period after having contact with somebody that has COVID-19. So we need that full 14 days to play out before we know whether or not you actually are going to develop the virus. So I think one of the things that I really just want to encourage people to do is if they are a case, to really, really think thoroughly about their contacts and to give those contacts to public health so we can then contact those people and let them know that they may be at risk and give them the opportunity to quarantine so they can reduce the chance of giving the virus to somebody else if they do, in fact, develop it. I understand it can be a little uncomfortable maybe to give that list of names to the public health folks that call you. But again, this is really our best tool we have to stop and slow the spread. And I think one of the other things that I want our community to know is we're trying really hard also to link cases to each other. So when we're looking at things like the county watch list, they're looking at sporadic cases. And what sporadic cases are cases that we really cannot identify where that person came into contact with somebody that gave them the virus. And so the more cases we can link to each other, common cases either tied to a setting or, just somebody that knew somebody who had it, they were interacting with each other, that basically helps us reduce the number of sporadic cases we have or cases that can't be linked to somebody else that had it. And that helps us, will help us not end up on our county watch list. So again, this is just another reason why it helps our community if people can tell us who their contacts are. So yeah, I think the other thing I want to talk about too a little bit around contacts and is maybe give people a good reminder about what to do if you've been tested for COVID-19. We really want to make sure that if you've been tested that you do stay home until you are either contacted by the health department or given information from us or your healthcare provider about what to do. Because if you have a reason to get tested, usually you'll meet either somebody who's symptomatic or you will be a contact. And we really want to make sure that people that are waiting on test results also isolate or quarantine depending on their situation. So just really wanting to get the word out about those kinds of things today.
And we were talking earlier how there has been an uptick. I can't remember exactly, but it seems like last week there was, 5 one day and 7. I mean, there has been an increase in cases, but at this point, those kind of fall into the sporadic category. You might have a couple that are related, but for the most part, they're kind of spread out, which then makes it, from what you were explaining, makes it way more complicated to deal with or to stop the spread. When it's originating from several different places, then it's kind of hard to find where that link is and isolate those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we're looking at the cases that we've had over the last few weeks, you can definitely find links and connections between some of them, but a lot of them we would put in the sporadic category. And I think you're right. Like, if we can narrow down where somebody got COVID-19, then we can basically put controls in place in that particular setting to stop and slow the spread, right? So if it's in a workplace, for example, we can identify quickly who was in close contact with the people or with the person that had it, send them home to quarantine, and really just quickly stop that particular case from impacting other people or spreading the virus to other people. And so if we can't nail down where people are getting it from, it definitely makes it harder for us to do that, because we can't, what we're trying to do is go to the source and basically figure out how many people came into contact with the source and stop it from going out any further. And when we can't identify the connections between the cases, it just makes it harder because we don't really know where to focus our isolation and quarantine efforts. And so, yes, this contact tracing, identifying the contacts and really trying to find those common links helps us do our job better.
And that's very dependent upon people cooperating with you and returning the phone calls, you were saying, and being willing to share the people that they've been in contact with. So one question I guess I have had is how many generations normally need to quarantine? Because I mean, that could get to be a tremendous amount of people that are involved.
Yeah, so, and I think this sometimes is, I'm glad you asked this question because it sometimes is confusing. So, we are only going to ask somebody to quarantine if they're a contact to a case. So, a contact to a contact would not be asked to quarantine. And this comes up a lot when we're talking about school settings. This is a great example of what happens in a school setting, where you might have, let's say, one student was in one class, they came into contact with somebody in that class, but they have a sibling that wasn't a contact to the person. So the contact that was in the classroom with the person that had COVID would be asked to quarantine, but the person that was not in that classroom would not be asked to quarantine. So I think, again, it's the contacts are asked to quarantine, contacts to contacts are not. However, I do want to emphasize that in that scenario, if I'm living in a household with somebody that was a contact, not a case, but a contact, and that contact develops symptoms, then it would be very, very, very wise for the entire household to quarantine or isolate at that point, because the chance that you're dealing with COVID-19 is high because somebody in the household had come into contact with the case.
So, and that kind of follows, we have these family units. They've all been together enough, the people in our office. I mean, we're essentially a family. The front door has been locked. We're closed, but if someone in our office, if someone in that family group, maybe my immediate family, my real family, then the likelihood of it spreading through the family is pretty high. And in fact, that is one of the things that, if I'm remembering right, that's when presumptive cases oftentimes are counted, is if it's a close family, even if that person doesn't have full-blown symptoms, that sometimes they're counted as presumptive, even if they did not test positive. Am I saying that accurately?
Yeah, well, so, and I think you're right. So if I am a contact to somebody that has COVID-19, they tested positive, and I develop a very specific set of symptoms. So it's not like if I got a headache, I'm not going to be presumptive.
But
I have to have a really
your sense of smell.
set. Yeah, and I don't know what the set of symptoms are off the top of my head. But you have to meet a really specific criteria. So I want people to understand that we're just not going to making people presumptive all the time. It actually doesn't happen very often, but we have reason to believe, or we know with certainty that you've been a close contact to a confirmed case. and you develop a certain set of symptoms that we feel are really consistent with COVID, then yes, we could make you presumptive. We will always encourage you to get a test to confirm that. But there are some cases where we would make you presumptive, and you may not get tested because we're pretty confident that's what's going on.
So let's talk for a minute about the testing supplies. Do you have an idea of whether we have enough? There's still, I got this question today is, certainly the schools, the universities, the schools, the public schools that are functioning, they have to have access to a lot of tests all the time. And is there, I don't know. So the general question is, do we have all the tests that we need? Is there plenty of bandwidth to do as many tests as that are required, or is there still a limitation from time to time?
So I would say at this point in time, I don't have any indication that there are not enough test kits, if that makes sense. So, we are still given a set of criteria that we use for testing. So we're not in a position where we test anybody in the community that wants a test. It's still not recommended. So, obviously, if somebody is ill, we would encourage them to work with their primary care provider. They have a relationship with that provider. They need medical care. That would be the best place for them to get a test if they were sick. If they don't have a healthcare provider, they can access urgent care, and they can get help there. I will tell you that CHD also is doing testing, but again, we're doing it within that criteria. So, if we identify somebody through an investigation that's symptomatic, we may test them. If we identify contacts to a case that are interested in testing and it makes sense, they fit the criteria, then we'll test them. So, we're working on expanding testing for contacts, because that would be asymptomatic contacts are now able to be tested. That would be one area where it may not make sense for them to go to a medical provider. So we're working on stepping up our capacity to do that. The federal government has allocated a large number of testing kits to states that are now being distributed to counties. And I know that CHD, along with other entities in our county, are getting some of these test kits that are coming down to the federal government. And I believe if we need to order more, there's a supply. So yeah, I don't have any indication that there's a shortage on tests, but I do, our criteria is still limited in who we can test. And so I think it's important that people know we're not just testing people that want it, we're testing people that meet certain criteria.
Well, and I think the question comes up because, and again, I'm not for certain on this, but it seems like there is routine testing that is a part of EOU's athletic programs. And so then for those players, even though they're in a family group, they're trying to limit their exposure to others, they still routinely, almost as a preventative method, are being tested. And so that is a little outside of the public health criteria that you're talking about. And I think that's why that question comes up.
Yeah, and I think that it is also possible for an entity like a university. I know this is happening across many universities where, they make an arrangement with a laboratory to do testing. And so, you're right, the testing that they're doing, the serial testing of athletes, or, testing that might be done. I don't know if there are any workplaces that are, doing regular testing of their employees. They can make private arrangements with a laboratory to do testing. And so, that definitely is outside of what we're doing in public health and outside what a healthcare provider would be doing. So, I guess it's not impossible that you're testing people that are not symptomatic, but those are currently usually done in a private relationship with a laboratory where you work out an agreement with them and you contract with them to do that testing.
And that totally makes sense. Okay. So what else do we need to touch on, Carrie, that you can think of?
Well, I think as we see the cases continuing to go up a little bit this week, and I'll be honest with you, like, I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot see the future. But I do think that we could continue to see cases show up. It seems like there are some sick people in the community, which again, we expected would happen in the fall. And, I think it's a couple of things that are really relevant to the increased activity and what's going on with our school metrics. So, it's really, important for our community to play a role in helping us keep the numbers down. If we can, as a community, implement the preventive measures that we've talked about. I mean, you and I have talked about it every single time I've been on here. Staying home if you're sick, washing your hands really well, wearing face coverings, and the physical distancing, all of those things, trying to stay, limit your interactions with people outside of your household, limit your group activities with people outside of your household. Those things really do play a part in the number of cases we have in the community. And for our students to stay in school and to, for some of our students who are doing school online, to get back in classrooms, we really do need to come together and try and keep those numbers low. And so, I just really encourage people to think about the activities that they're doing and think about, trying hard to limit the spread. And I also think that one of the other factors that we're looking at for school metrics is test positivity. So, if you are symptomatic and you are concerned about going and getting tested because you don't want to see our numbers go up, you might actually want to go ahead and get tested, because it could help with that test positivity rate. Because, the more tests that we get done, the more likely it is that that test positivity rate could go down. So, if you're having any symptoms, like, and you're worried about our numbers going up, I don't think that would be a reason to not get tested. It's actually, again, like I said earlier, better for us to know who has it, so we can identify who their contacts are, so we can stop and slow the spread. So, I understand people might not want to see the numbers keep going up, but I would really encourage them to go ahead and get tested anyway if they have a reason to get tested, because it's actually probably more beneficial for us to have that information when we're trying to bring our students back to school. And also, again, trying to limit the spread, because we can't slow the spread if we don't know who has it and who we need to ask to isolate and quarantine.
And I follow that. And we've talked about the positivity rate before. The positivity rate is based upon the percentage of those, the percentage positive of those that actually had the test taken. And so yep. It's not a, it's not a gauge on, it's not really any kind of a gauge at all on how we are doing as a community, because you're testing people that you are suspicious of being ill. So of course, it's going to be a higher percentage of what the percentage of people that are actually sick in a community. So, but I follow what you're saying, and that is that, yeah, but the fact is the more negative tests that we have come by, that improves our positivity rate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so yeah, it does. The more tests that we have, that we can have taken, then we do really kind of have a gauge of the health of our community.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. All right. Well, and I guess I just want to say one other thing too, and that is that, all of these, I mean, I'm sure there's a segment of people that are out there is like, what, I've got to keep track of, so this person in my life is, they have a positive case. And now, the idea that if I spent an accumulation of 15 minutes a day with that particular person, then I could be asked to isolate. Mm-hmm. And the point is that at this point, it's all a guess. I mean, we're just guessing. I mean, it is, the rules or the thing are, for those skeptics that say, well, there's no way of knowing whether you can be positive or not. And it's like, yeah, that's right. But from a public health place, you have to give people some guidance. There has to be some, there has to be some standard of when people should isolate and when they shouldn't, and, I think back to from where we have come, where, a huge part of our civilization was shut down because we didn't know what to do. And now the choices that we're making, the guidance is it has more intelligence. It has more evidence based than what we had before. So, it's the best that what we have right now. We're just, and that the people upstream that are passing the things down, the people on the other end of it that are trying to cooperate, we're just trying to do our best. We're just trying to do what we can. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're never going to take away all the risk. I mean, that's
Right.
the thing. Like, we know the virus is in the community. And though that's why instead of, we talked about this before in the beginning, we had these widespread orders where we had every single person stay home. And now we really try and focus on, like, yes, this person truly has a risk of developing the virus because they were in close contact with somebody that has it. Let's keep them away from people, make sure they don't get sick. And again, really is the best control measure we have right now that can impact the least amount of people. And so I think if we can do good at, really implementing the public health measures that we're asking people to do right now, then we really can have an impact on how much virus we have in our community.
Good. Well, great. Well, Carrie, thank you so much. Any other last word before we quit today?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity. I do encourage people, if they have questions about COVID-19, to check out our website, which is chdinc.org. And we have a COVID page /COVID-19. And we're putting a lot of this information up on our Facebook page and Instagram as well. We have kind of little tidbits of information about what to do if you test positive, what to do if you test negative, all kinds of like little bits of information that might help people understand the work that we're doing more if they have any questions.
Good. All righty. All right. Well, and thank you, Eastern Oregon, for tuning in. We appreciate you being a part of this, and we'll plan on being with CHD again 2 weeks from today.